We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
And welcome back to another episode of the California Golden Bearcast, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. It is bye week, so we don't have a game to cover, but we still want to give our listeners and fans something to listen to this week. So we're here remotely once again. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob. Alongside me always is the international man of mystery, Andy. Where are you currently located right now?
Who better to tell you that, Rob, than the cast of Book of Mormon?
But I pray I'm sent to my favorite place, Orlando. I love you, Orlando.
No one has ever been as kind to Orlando. Oh, gosh, that's such a tremendous Broadway show. Rob, have you seen it?
I have not, but I've heard the some of the tracks from it.
It's fantastic. I highly recommend. But nonetheless, we're giving the people what they want. The bye week pod.
Andy's reporting in from Orlando, and
The one and only.
the one and only.
There's a nice big billboard that says Orlando Gun Show, and it's got like a 9mm, as big of a 9mm as I've ever seen. And that, my friends, is how you know you're in Florida. I love that. I just silenced.
I don't know how to
even have anything to
what
say.
What am I supposed to say to that? I absolutely do not know what I can say to that to segue this in no form or fashion.
Sean will know what I'm talking about.
Yes. But yeah, so we're here. We're talking about the bye week. This is gonna be a relatively short pod because we don't have a game to talk about. But I think what we did want to talk about was where we are currently, because we're about at the halfway point in the season. Because this is week 6 or week 7 of the season. And so we're about at the halfway point. We played 5 games. We got 7 more left. And so it'll be interesting to see where you stand on the season currently, where I stand on the season currently, what the stats say about the season currently, and just having a discussion about that. So, and we do have a couple of questions and takes from fans, and I'll interject with those as we talk. But Andy, give me your breakdown on what you've thought about the season so far, and has that changed your perspective on the rest of the season? Of course, given the context of how the rest of the conference is playing right now as well.
Yeah, there's a couple factors that, I think you have to look at. How do other teams look in comparison to how we thought and expected them to look? How did Cal look so far? And then what did Cal do with the first 5 games? Wait, am I right on that?
Yeah.
6 games?
5 games. You're right. 5 games.
5 games. And I think that when going back to the preview pod, one of the things that we said that I said pretty clearly was we needed to come out of the first 5 4-1. I think I might have actually extended it out to Colorado, where I said the first 6 games you got to be 4-2. So we still have a shot at doing that. And I think, when you're looking at Cal at 4-2, and you look at, that's when I think it's important to kind of look at what else is out there. Because, people are right. Colorado changed their coach, obviously. So Colorado's been absolutely atrocious this year. Fired Carl Durrell and had already fired their. Who else? They fired someone else. He was either
it was their defensive coordinator, but it was
So
they fired them the same week.
So, they're really resetting, and I know a lot of people are like, "Well, yeah, the kids get inspired with the new coach." It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess it did kind of work at Washington State, which is a good example, like counter to that. But I really don't feel like most of the time when kids can be inspired for a quarter, but when you just have like a bad team that's already lost a lot of games, it's pretty hard to just turn that around. Like most of the time, I feel like you see a middling team, maybe the middling team fires their coach and they become a better team. But very rarely do I sort of see a team that's like a gutter team fire their coach and then just be like, we're going to be great. So I'm expecting that to be a win. That's why I'm writing it off. And obviously nothing's certain these days. And if it were a loss, then I think you're looking at this program in a very negative light and lots of, that's a really bad scenario. I don't even really want to talk about that. I think the big thing that people are doing right now and how things have gone. So 3-2, right? You lose the Notre Dame game, kind of got beat pretty handily in the second half against Washington State. So you have to say the season expectation drops from, what did I say, like 8-9 wins.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought this team was capable of doing. This season, in particular, down to, you're probably just hoping to scrape to get to 6-7. Like, ultimately, I think we have to battle to get to 6 or 7 wins. So I'll stop there, Rob. I'd be curious to get your thoughts.
I think the same. I think the difference between me, like my floor of the season and the ceiling of the season, just got a lot narrower. I said the floor was 6, and I said the ceiling could be 8 or 9. I think it just shrinks down to the floor still being 6, but the ceiling now shrinks down to 7 or 8. And it's just, so it's in that range, right? Just depends on a couple of games going different ways. Like you alluded to a bunch of it. Like you talked about Colorado, the guys getting inspired, like, and people saying, it's an inspired team. I'd say sometimes, yeah, they have the potential to pull off an upset. I don't think it's against us, but then also to help that, not a but also to help that point. Like I think it was 2018 Oregon State. They fired their head coach, and then they had their DB's coach as their thing, and we were thinking it was a trap game, but then we go up there, and that was the first 40-point performance by the Wilcox team, right? With Chase.
Yep.
And so there's that one.
Exactly.
There's SC last year, which was like they had just fired their coach, and you could argue like they had hype because they already knew Lincoln Riley was coming in.
Last game of under his tenure.
Yeah, that didn't do much, despite him really not being there. But it was like, some of these kids were probably auditioning to stay on with the team when Lincoln Riley came, right? But still wasn't that big of a game. So it goes both ways, but I would say the argument mounts more for it not really being a factor than it being a factor. Granted, I won't say it's like 99 to 1%, but somewhere closer to the 75 to 25% range. So yeah, there's that, and then there's other teams in the conference that do not look great at all. Like Arizona State does not look good, and they fired their head coach. We don't play them this year, but just I'm looking at the entire conference as a whole right now. We beat Arizona. Washington State looks better than we expected them. Washington looks better than we expected them to, but also at the same time, the last 2 weeks makes it kind of look like maybe they are the middling conference team that we expected them to be. They just started off the season really strong.
Yep.
Oregon State looks exactly where I expected them to be. Granted, they could also potentially be 6-0. Like those 2 games they lost were just nail biter games. Like the SC loss, was definitely winnable. So yeah, at minimum they could have been 5-1 if they happened to pull that through. SC, of course, looks like the juggernaut they are. They have concerns. They've played a couple of opponents real close, so they're 6-0. So you still got to give that to them. But at the same time, like a couple of those wins were like, oh, that could have flipped easily. Utah does not look like the best team in the conference anymore. Like I don't know what's happening there over the last couple weeks. And then of course UCLA looks astoundingly better than we thought they would be.
Yeah.
So context, right? And I think that's the thing. Like I think Andy, you said that UCLA might, like, you tossed it up to like either a 50-50 or like a win going into the season. Like
No, definitely not.
Did you not say that? Maybe I said that.
No, you said that.
I said that, yeah.
I have never given that game a win ever because we always lose.
Yeah. I said it was a 50-50 or a win, but now it's looking more like a 50-50 or a loss.
50-50? Yeah, I mean, no chance. UCLA's ranked like 11th in the country, aren't they?
I mean, Utah was ranked 7th. I mean, so
That's
for me,
true.
it doesn't matter. Like, because a lot could happen by the time we play them.
Yes, valid.
They're 11th right now. So yeah, I think context across the board is necessary to just kind of recalibrate where we think the team is going to be. Like, PFF has us as the 11th overall team in the conference, right? But there's a significant drop off between us and then Colorado at 12th. Like, PFF scores us at 70.7 overall. Colorado's overall is 42.7. Like, that's a drastic drop off. Offensively, we're ranked 10th in terms of total offense, 67.4, above Washington State and Colorado. Defensively, we're ranked 9th, above Stanford, Arizona, and Colorado. So that's kind of where we are from a PFF standpoint. Standings wise, of course, we're weirdly 5th. So, because we're 1-1 in the conference, and Arizona State has 2 losses, Oregon State has 2 losses, Huskies have 2 losses, Cougars have 2 losses, the Wildcats have 2 losses, the Buffaloes have 2 losses, and the Cardinals are 0-4 in the conference. So,
Yes. So, I mean, I think that I wouldn't be surprised to see this team kind of like buck the advanced stats. I mean, with PFF and all that, I'm just not too concerned. I think that one of the most reassuring things was like actually going and revisiting, because I was without service on Saturday. So like revisiting the Pac-12 scores and just seeing like, that's why it's so hard to be whiplash. Like, to just go back to last week's conversation, when you have a whiplash reaction to a loss, and then you look around the conference and you see a bunch of things happen that week that sort of creates this dark, cloudy picture, and you buy into that, it's too focused on just that weekend.
yeah.
And then if you fast forward to this week, okay, you look at it, you were like, okay, Washington's going to be a really hard game. Well, Washington lost to Arizona State and gave up a ton of points and all of a sudden looked really weak. And those are the types of games when we're going in and playing not elite defense that favors us, because we know that our defense can rise to that and overcompensate for where our offense cannot do the same if the game script is flipped. So now you look at Colorado, Washington's more of a toss-up. Stanford lost in one of the worst ways I've seen in a long time,
Which was amazing.
Oregon State looked bad against Stanford for 3 quarters and magically pulled that off. So like that game is very much like a toss-up, if not, like I think you're starting to look at it and you're like, okay, so like if Washington's indeed a toss-up and not a loss, and Colorado's a win, so there you potentially have your 4, if Stanford's going to be your 5, and then it's basically Oregon State will call it a toss-up, Washington call it a toss-up, and then the path to 6 is still hard, but it's not impossible to see how you get to 6. And then from there, am I missing someone? I feel like I'm missing someone.
Or Oregon State, or
No, I said
Washington,
Oregon State.
Oregon,
I got
SCLA.
Oregon. Yeah, Oregon's who I'm missing. So then you got Oregon, Yeah, you look at Oregon, SC, and UCLA, and I still think Oregon at home, that's going to be a tough game, man. It's just going to be tough. But, so if you lose those three, all you have to do is win one of those toss-up games that I mentioned, and I'm pretty sure you're bowling there. And then you win another toss-up game, then you're looking at 7-5. So it's the season. Like I do think, like ceiling's probably you're right, 7-8. Realistically, 6, unless we magically figure out the offensive line, which once again, you can push it higher, but we won't do that because that's not doing anyone any favors.
Yeah. I mean, we're legit right in the middle of the season, and like college football is such a weird sport. Like it's so hard to predict, right? Like you could predict like how this team is going to go just off of how they played. But then there's always a few teams every year where it's like at the halfway point of the season, like something starts clicking and then everything starts going their way. I'm not saying that's going to be us, but it's just like it's so hard to gauge like where the turning point might be, or if a turning point never comes. I'm hoping it starts here with the Colorado game. Like I was talking like this like just the last 2 weeks, right? Put up 49 points against Arizona, and then we only put up 9 points against Washington State. Defensively, like we've given up 13 points, 14 points, 17 points, or 24 points, 31 points, and 28 points, which even the Washington State game, like we gave up 28, but like the last one came late, so we really gave up 21 the whole game. So like all of that considered, like we know what the defense is going to do week in and week out. Is it a concern, or is it like it's the glass half full or glass half empty, right? Like the glass half empty version is we know what our offense is going to give us, and that's what it's going to be. The glass half full version of that is we know what this offense looks like if it's clicking, and can it click for at least half of the remaining games, considering that 4 out of our last 7 games are at home. So if you can get that to click and it works at home, then you're in a very good spot because you know the defense is gonna be consistent throughout the rest of the season. And that's the place where I don't know which way I lean. Clearly, we know where a lot of the fans lean, right? And a lot of the voices around the Cal community. But I just don't know. Like I think we're both out on Musgrave, but I do believe there is a little bit of magic that's still left that could happen just because of watching the 49-point performance. But I'd like to know where you stand.
It's that I think it's the sense I was watching. Game was I watching? I think it was the highlights from one of the Pac-12 games, and I was watching one of the running backs and who it was an Oregon State Stanford game, and the running back like had a nice play where he it was a big touchdown and broke out, but it was so interesting because I was watching it and I was like, damn, he's slow. And that's just because I've been watching too much Jaden Ott. Like Ott would have been gone once he beat the first offender, and this guy still had to beat 2 more. And that's the difference. Is like the skill position talent is real. So you're totally right. It's like if the O-line can figure out a way to scheme around its deficiencies, there isn't a reason to look at this offense and say, could you do 3/4 of what you did against Arizona? Sure. It's just such a big ask, sadly, because we know it's not like we know that we have just like the physical talent from these high 4-star, 5-star guys that just need to be coached up a little bit, and there isn't a tremendous amount of faith with the coaches around that position anyways, so that's why it's a little bit more grim.
Yeah.
But I do agree. You're totally right. And like the one thing I keep going back to is like, what was it? I think it was the season that we ended up going against Illinois. Was that the one where
2019?
Was that it? Was that where we lost like 3 games in a row?
We lost 4. We lost to Arizona.
4?
We beat
Yeah.
Ole Miss. We come home. We lose to Arizona State Friday night. Then we lose to Oregon. Then we lose to Oregon State. Then we lose to Utah.
And that was like when Wilcox said, "We're in it right now," or whatever. We're in the storm.
Yeah, we're in the eye of the storm or whatever. Yeah.
And then did we win 3 straight out of that?
We
I
won
think?
3 out of the next 4. So we beat Washington State. We lost to SC. And then we beat Stanford and we beat UCLA.
Yeah. So that's. I know that we can do that. We have precedent for being able to do it, and it's just a matter of we just have to have a strong October. You have a strong October where you can beat Colorado, you can beat Washington, and even if you lose against Oregon, I mean, are people really going to be upset about being like 4-3 heading into the last 4? Right? Is that right? Is that math right? Good lord. But
yeah, ish.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can come out of this gauntlet of the month of October, right, which is Colorado, Washington, Oregon, that's left, you can come out of this 2-1. I'd say your season outlook changes drastically.
You're 5-3. Sorry, I got that wrong. That was my math.
Yeah. You'd
Right?
be 5-3.
5-3 coming out of that. Yeah, you're 5-3 coming out of that, needing 1 win for bowl eligibility, and then everything else after that's cake. You know, if you get it, you're happy. Yeah, so you just kind of got to go 2-1 here.
Yeah, I think it's a must. I think if you come out of this 1-2 or, God forbid, 0-3, I think the coaching staff might lose the fan base.
0-3 is. I don't think you lose the fan. You definitely lose a lot of the fan base in 0-3. 0-3 would be devastating. But I think 1-2, you're probably still on a similar trajectory we were talking about, which is 6. You're still at 6. I don't know how much drastically shifts because you still have Oregon State and Stanford left, and you have the 4th win being Colorado. So you're still kind of looking at it, and you're like, well, 6 wins is right there. You may lose a bit of the fan base, but your overall outcome, which is like what we've said, and I've seen a lot of people talk about, is we just want a head coach that takes us to a bowl every year, you know, and nothing fancy. I'm like, fine, like that's what I've been saying. So if that's really the barometer, like 6-6 or 7-5, you don't really lose that possibility at 1-2. You certainly lose the momentum, but you still get a lot of those games at home too, which helps.
Yeah, I mean that's why like 0-3 is like you can't do that. That's like the
Can't do it.
That's
Gotta go
that's the killer.
Gotta go to Colorado and handle business. Like there's no, yeah, you know, you just gotta go to Colorado and handle it.
Yeah, I mean the off chance they lose to Colorado, like, oh, man, I don't even want to think about just the outcry. Like,
I have to cancel the podcast.
Yeah,
we're not podcasting about that game if that happens.
The mob will be at the gates, like with the pitchforks and everything, if you lose to Colorado.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Like, you know, like Arizona's lost last year, like you could, you know, people hated it, but like you could still give up the excuse of like you were missing half the team.
100%.
But
you're missing 40 players. No one's going to win that game.
Yeah, but if you lose to Colorado this week, there's no excuses for that whatsoever.
Yeah, especially coming out of a bye.
Yeah.
And Wilcox has been somewhat suspect coming out of bye weeks. You know, we've seen less than ideal performances.
Yep.
Whereas I felt like Sonny out of the bye was in my memory, and this is not substantiated, but I do feel like he was pretty good out of bye weeks. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is there's just a lot of home games in here. So Colorado, Washington at home, Oregon at home, Stanford at home, UCLA at home, and Oregon State on the road. We've proven we can win at. So overall, there's a lot of potential still left in this team, and it's kind of up to the coaching staff to go and find it. And I know some people were like, yeah, I would love to see a change. I thought Wilcox said in his press conference was, I mean, that was about as pointed as he's been about the offense in a while too, right? Like he was,
Yeah.
I felt like he was like saying that the coaching has to be better on that side of the football. I mean, he's saying some things like it's very clear who's under the gun. And he was asked also about like bringing in Christ, right? I think Ferrado actually asked him about like bringing in an offensive mind as a consultant or something like that.
Yeah,
which is a good
bringing
question.
in like an outside voice.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I thought it was interesting to see his thoughts on that, and overall, like, you know, why he wasn't going to do that. But I think we all just have that memory of Tedford at Washington, and then seeing the Tedford wrinkle against us, and being like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? But yeah, it's not really a thing, and it's hard to bring in someone from the outside and change too much of what you're already doing. But I think ultimately, as you see someone that's addressing the problems, like, your realistic solution is skilling up the players you already have. It's not too much that you can do at this point. That's the reality of it. That's why the offseason is important.
Yeah, I mean the devil's advocate point to that would just be this coaching staff has had these players and all of the offseason, and we haven't seen like good enough improvement. I don't know how you could expect, you know, that to change just because you've had 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, agree. 100% agree. 100% agree.
So yeah, I mean it's like we're hoping, but you know, like the realism played in here doesn't really help anybody, or doesn't necessarily help the hope that we have, or substantiate the hope that we have. But we still hope. Like that's the whole point of sports. Like just to go over like some of the S&P Plus stuff, right? You know, which is great analytics. In terms of the rankings across the West Coast, it's UCLA at 8, Oregon 9. This is overall rankings, like offense and defense combined. Utah 10, SC at 24. And then we also added some of our opponents. So Notre Dame's at 27, UW's 31, Washington State's 45, Oregon State's 56, Cal's 74, Stanford 75, Arizona's 96, UNLV is 100, Colorado is 117. Oh, and also ASU is 64th. So
I think the other thing too is like, where's Notre Dame at now that they've turned their season around?
27.
Yeah, I mean that loss. I think UNLV rattling off a couple of wins.
That helps us.
That helped us. Notre Dame looks like a good football team. That, you know, and then Washington State sort of. I watched the extended highlights from the Washington State SC game. They played SC super tight in that first half.
Yep.
And then kind of SC just did SC things. But, you know, it wasn't a complete blowout. Like, they played that game. They played that team pretty close, and definitely for the first half.
Yeah, I mean,
so
there, as we said, like there are teams here that we didn't think were going to be good, but now are really good, and then the teams that we thought would be good haven't necessarily like sucked, but they've been middling, and that's kind of where we're at in the conference. Like, the question I would ask you is, like in terms of your expectation of where the conference is as a whole, in terms of like parity and where teams are at, do you think it's more or less where you thought it would be in terms of the season, or is there a bigger gap between certain teams than you thought there would be?
I think it's more or less there. I think I expected Oregon to be worse. So I think like Oregon getting out of Washington State with that, being able to narrowly escape with that win really helped them. They're definitely playing, and then also like the advanced analytics likes Oregon, so they're playing better, and offensively they're more impressive than I expected. That's my big surprise. I think besides that, I mean UCLA being top 10, I didn't see. No one saw that coming.
Yeah.
I don't think. Definitely like the South, the Pac-12 South. I mean those two schools that are leaving are making a good case for. The Big Ten's got to be pretty happy right now.
Yeah.
Besides that, there's a good amount of parity. You sort of expected it. Utah kind of comes in as the incumbent, but then had sort of that big season last season. It's hard to do those back to backs, and maybe you expect some regression there. Washington kind of looks like a team that brought in a new coach, and that's more in line with what I was expecting. Washington State looks better than expected, and Rickert looks like pretty solid, and then. I think it's a little bit more competitive than maybe I had thought. I thought maybe there'd be like a strong top 6 and then a really weak bottom 6, and instead it's looking like maybe there's more of like a competitive 8 or maybe even like a competitive 9.
And then a bottom 3.
And then if you were to say like ASU, Arizona, and Stanford the bottom 3, but it's hard to put Colorado is in the mix and maybe pull Arizona out of that. Yeah, so I think it's maybe a little bit more top heavy than I expected. But what about you?
I would agree. I think you're spot on. It's definitely like the thing I would add to that is just the teams that we thought would be in the top aren't necessarily the teams we thought would be in the top before the season started. But it still stays around that like top tier group, right? Oregon's up there. SC's up there. I think we probably are replacing what we thought Washington might be with where UCLA is. I think you make that swap, and then you got the middle of the conference with the Arizonas, the Cals, the Oregon States, and right there. I think Oregon State might be like a half tier above us as it stands. But overall, like they're right underneath that. There's like a couple teams right underneath the top of the conference, and then there's like a 2A 1B group, and then there's like the third tier, and then there's like the bottom of the conference. I think we're currently in that third tier. I don't think we're in that 1A 2B conference or tier yet. Rattle off a couple of wins here in the next couple of weeks, and we probably push ourselves into that conversation. But as of right now. Just seeing how other teams are performing and who they're beating and how they're beating them, yeah, it's definitely we're not in that caliber yet.
Got to handle business against Colorado, and you set the table for a really fun end of the season. I mean, it's just so much better than how last season was, where we were just like always kind of behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
Playing this game of catch up, and it was like, oh, can we get to the bowl? Can we get to the bowl? And like here's like we're front running more against the record.
Yeah.
So as long as we continue to do that, it's almost like you can win one, lose one, win one, lose one, win one, lose one. You play 500 ball all the way out, and you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, I mean,
and this team's capable of that. There's no reason not to expect that. This team isn't proven itself to be anything else other than a 500 football team for a long time.
I mean, the biggest thing for any of Wilcox's season so far, and I guess we can kind of talk about this for a little bit, but like Wilcox's like win losses have been built primarily on securing at least 2 wins in the out of conference schedule, right? Like up until last season, we were undefeated in our out of conference schedule, and then last year we lose 2 back to back, right? The Nevada and the TCU game. But then this season, we win 2 and lose the Notre Dame game. So that secures you to 2 wins. All you need to do is get to 4. But my question off of that to you would be, at what point is that not enough? Like, at what point do we not consider that as a factor anymore and want us to win more conference games?
You've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo or honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker out there, you can try spicy ghost pepper, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Listen, I'm going to dare you to do it. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs that you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and then grab a few more napkins and prepare to nug like you've never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's.
At what point are we looking at the conference record and simply saying we want better than that?
Because, like we talk about getting the 6 wins, and I think you and I are on the same page, but there are those people that say, look, like going under 500 in conference play every year is not like a sustainable way to get to bowl games, because you're out of conference. I mean, it makes sense to a certain degree for me, because your out of conference schedule changes every year. It depends on who you're playing. And whatnot, versus if you can consistently beat in conference teams, like those teams you're playing year in and year out.
There's definitely one of the seasons that I think we should have a 500 or better conference record.
I mean, we were 4-5 in the conference last year. We were,
I think maybe 5-4.
5-4. I mean, that's still above 500, right?
Yeah, and I think like that's realistic. I don't think Wilcox is building the program based around, hey, who cares about the in-conference games? Let's have a strong out-of-conference performance and then win a couple conference games and never place higher than, their goal is to win the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I don't think it's anyone's vision to just get to a bowl game, but like be kind of more towards the bottom of the conference every year. It's not a sustainable path to building the talent level that we want to attract to the program, because yes, it's cool to win those out of conference games, but I don't think anybody's committing to the program because you beat UC Davis. They want to commit to the program because you played Notre Dame competitively, or they wanted to commit to the program because you beat Ole Miss. That's and then ultimately they commit to the program because I have competing offer against Oregon, but you guys beat Oregon this year. It'd be fun to be in Berkeley and be on this team. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think this season there's just like a perfect opportunity to do it. You're 1-1. You have Colorado and you have Stanford and you have Oregon State that look like gettable games. And you have Washington as a toss-up, and everything else you got to fight for.
I think,
but you get the majority of them at home. It's like I think you have a clear path to being successful in the Pac-12.
Well, if I did the math correctly, if we lose all the other games that you didn't mention, that's 4-5.
4-5.
Because you're saying you beat Colorado, you beat Oregon State, you beat Stanford, so that's 3 wins out of the remaining 7. 4. So that'd be 4.
And then your 3 is SC, Oregon, and UCLA. Yeah, I mean that's the reality of it, right? It's hard. It's a hard conference, but I'm not mad at 4-5. Like 4-5 in conference, like I don't know. Maybe it's the Mark Fox effect. It's like we're like 8-24 in conference or whatever.
Well, 8's the highest we've ever reached. I think we've been under 5 for the last last 5 years.
Yeah, so I don't know. 4-5 to me, it's like you're playing competitive football, could flip to 5-4. It's when you're like winning one conference game or two conference games, or you're never beating any of your in-state rivals. But like, I have to say this, like a lot of, I truly think a lot of alumni are pretty damn happy if you're going bowling and you beat Stanford. If you check those two boxes and you have the APR to back it, I just don't know how many like true alumni are looking at that and saying that they're upset with it. Even if you're 4-5 in conference.
True alumni, or like, are you talking about like the high donors?
I'm thinking like higher donors, maybe those
The
that
power
are
players.
a little less
Yeah.
into it, just like a little bit removed, kind of like to go to Memorial on Saturdays, commit to the program, donate to the program. Really, like what matters most. Big game matters a lot.
Yep.
Even at 5-7, I said that last year. Even at 5-7, it's hard not to call that 5-7 season a win. We won the Axe. Like we got the Axe in a very satisfying way. There's a lot of Cal fans in that building that were pretty pleased, including our friend Rob here.
That was a great day. Yeah, like that this question is always is one of those, like, it just can't think of the right words. It kind of splits me in half, because like half of me is like, yeah, you're right. We had this long discussion about this last week, right? Like that's kind of where we are as a program. Like, let's get that sustained success first before we look at, can we get to 8, 9, 10 wins consistently. Like let's build our name up first a little bit, back from just nowhere. But at the same time, like also a part of me is like, is it too much, like, to ask for more, like, that quickly? Like, we only have a finite number of seasons that we're able to enjoy these teams. But like, is it too much to ask for real success on the field? And I have a hard time figuring out like what should be the majority of my feelings, because I know like it's good to have both, but it's sometimes it feels like it's skewed one way or another for a lot of people, and it's hard trying to find that balance. Like, what about you? Where do you stand on that?
I think I go back and forth, but I've been pretty firm with my stance being I'm comfortable where we're at right now. And I think like I've been resisting the urge to do what I will sometimes do with like I used to do all the time with Novak Djokovic, which is like expect perfection. But like I could do it with Novak because he could accomplish it.
Yeah.
Right?
Or with your Giants,
and
too. Or any pro team, really.
Yeah. I mean, the Giants are a good example right now. I mean, I think there's a lot of noise about people with Farhan, and there just seems to be a lot of chatter about, he hasn't worked out. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I just don't. I mean, we won 106 games or 107 games last season and turned it around way faster than we expected. And a lot of people are like, oh, it clearly doesn't work. What about it didn't work? Like, we just won 107 games. So I think it's like the same thing. It's like people really just want to turn everything, have it all just be, okay, you win 107 games every single year. Like, that's why you play the game. And I think with Cal, it's like I try to resist leaning in that way, where I go into it thinking like we should win the Pac-12 that year. I think that this season, to me, there's a lot of potential behind this season. I really liked it because it felt like we were adding good pieces on offense. We were resetting at the right positions. And I was wrong on the O-line. I had just sort of dismissed the O-line as like we would be fine, and it's proven itself to be a huge headache. But I don't really allow myself to set the expectation that is where our standards should be. And you're right. Let's say with the Warriors expectation is, my fandom with the Warriors is way different. It's like you set the expectation at being competitive all the way through the Western Conference Finals, and you set your ceiling at winning the overall championship. And that's because they've proven they can do it, and it's just very different than the way I kind of look at things at Cal. So I've sort of been firmly in that place where it's like I try to avoid that level of that look, that phantom look where I'm like, well, think about how good we could be. Because like there's realistic limitations on this program, and I think that it's like we haven't totally acknowledged that, and that's sort of what maybe like the reckoning that you and I had last week was like, hey, we need to just like actually reconcile this and say this era that Tedford accomplished, like he did so doing things that are now entirely impossible to do at Cal. And the college football landscape has shifted so dramatically that it also makes it tremendously unlikely that we would be able to do that at Cal. However, you still have programs like a Utah or UCLA that have proven that you can succeed and be competitive, and that's where we are setting our standard at. But we're not going in saying, hey, we should be competing against Alabama and be, vying for a college football playoff spot. I think I heard like someone was like, I heard a radio ad, and they're like, it's Ohio State is championship or bust. And I was like, wow, it must be nice.
Yeah.
So I want what's best for the program, and I want what's best for like ultimately the best outcome that's possible. But I'm trying to be super realistic with myself about like what that can be, and also just sort of been like, I think that these seasons when you win I thought 2019 was a fun season.
Yep.
We won, the 8 games, the bowl game, the Red Box Bowl. Like coming out of that, we got national press on our secondary. People thought Cal was going to come in and be a dark horse pick to win the Pac-12. That's where I want to be. That's it. I don't know if I really need to set my expectations higher than that until we consistently can prove that we can sort of meet that threshold. And then once you get there, you can kind of raise them.
This is hilarious because like the more I'm listening to you, the more I'm like, wait, are we? It's like that. It's like that GIF. Like, are we the baddies? Like, are you and I more pessimist than like Nam and Nick and them? Like, cause their standard for the program is to want to see better. To what extent, I'd have to ask them. But like, what they think is the realistic, like what they want the program to achieve. But like just talking about, or just listening to you talk about, what we talked about last week and all that. Like, I'm like, man, are we actually the more of like the realist pessimists in like the speaking Cal fandom? Because that's kind of what it feels like right now. Or is that just me?
We're not like the pure optimists. I think yes, it depends on the scope of like we don't have that unadulterated optimism that you would have about like your favorite team that you're just like they're gonna win every game.
Yeah, or like every year this is the year.
Yeah, and I think that just is like, we've been at this thing for like 12 years now, so there's a little bit of perspective that hopefully one would gain over that period of time. I don't know. I don't think anyone is. I look at it and I'm sort of like, yeah, optimism comes in all different shapes and sizes. And a lot of people look at me and they're like, you're one of the most optimistic Cal fans that I know, because I think we go into any game and can win it. And that might be insane. Like, I'm looking at the SE game, I'm like, we can win that game. So, like, maybe I'm insane in that degree. It's just sort of like what the standard at which I expect.
Yeah, like,
and I think there's the difference between, like, kind of your expectation for where a program should be versus... And, like, that's where I've been kind of coming to more recently, like last season, when I was like, I think we're not going to have a winning season. And, like, just sort of looking at these things and trying to be more realistic with it. It's just, like, almost preventing myself from getting to that point where it's like, we should do this. Rather, it's more so of, like, we could do this. And I'm okay living with the could. So maybe, yeah, like, maybe it's more... I think it's what is it, a cop-out? It's, like, hedging.
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm doing, like, a consistent hedging.
Yeah, we've been hurt before, which is why I think we do that more. But like we're also more realistic with, just because we've been doing this for so long now, we're privy to more information. We're privy to more like different takes or whatever about the program that we might not have had like when we were younger, but we do now. And I think that has an effect on how we look at the program too, and going like, look, Like circumstantially, like yeah, if the stars align, could we go undefeated? Sure, but realistically, probably not. Like we know how to understand the sport a lot better, but also like from a trajectory standpoint of like coaching eras, we just know like certain things aren't possible just because of the landscape and other bureaucratic issues or whatever it may be. And I think that plays a part into it, where we want to be like purely unadulterated like hype optimism, but we're also like we know that that's not the case, and there's no real net positive for us if we only think about the team in that view, because that doesn't like help anybody. Like it doesn't help whoever listens to us and how we look at the team. Like we're always trying to gauge like where we can get better, where we can like get more investment, what more can we do as a program, or where can the improvements be made. But I think if you're always like just optimism, like you're never going to really talk about the real issues that need to be resolved before you can reach those expectations. But
agreed.
That's a good conversation. I think that's a good place to end it. I'm looking through like the fan comments, but there aren't really any like big notable ones. Terrence asked a question about Rings of Power, but I'm not caught up, and I don't think you're watching or caught up either. So,
what's Rings of Power?
Huh?
I don't even know what Rings of Power is.
It's the Lord of the Rings prequel that's on Amazon, which is superb.
Yes,
I highly recommend you watch it.
Is it?
The season finale is actually this week, so if you want to binge watch it, I just recommend just starting next week. But yeah, Terrence, if you're listening, I know what question you're asking, and I don't want to spoil it for Andy, so I won't ask it. But also, I'm not caught up fully, so I don't want to speculate. But that's it. We don't have anything else. Andy, any other closing thoughts before we close this out and reconvene after the Colorado game?
Let's just take care of business. Time to handle business. I'm confident that we will. I'm excited for Saturday. And then I look forward to talking about next week with some rosy lenses towards what the next part of the season could look like.
That's pun unintended.
It's super unintended.
We have to be very careful about using that word term in any form, like verb, adjective, noun, just that word.
Always. So my apologies in advance.
Okay, so that wraps it up for us here on the Golden Bear Cast. You can find me at Rob11HWANG on Twitter. You can find Andy on Twitter, but he won't respond to you because he no longer has Twitter. You can also tweet at us at Golden Bearcast. You can also email us goldenbearcast@gmail.com. We actually got a really, really nice email this week. That's the one thing I wanted to add on. So yeah, thank you. Let me grab his name. Do you remember his name? I don't remember his name. I'm trying to pull it up right now.
Not off the top of my head.
Give me 1 second. I'm pulling up the email. David. Thank you, David. It was a very nice email. Andy and I had a very good time reading it. And well, we should have responded to you, but we're responding to you via the podcast. So yeah, thanks for the email. It definitely means a lot that you listen and are giving us your thoughts on all of the takes that we did too. He gave us a 7-point email, and it was awesome.
It was really great. All the comments and all of the listeners, we appreciate you all. So thanks for taking time out of your day, your morning, your night, whatever it may be, and spending it with us, because it does really mean a lot. And the comments were great last week, because it's definitely a controversial subject. So even those that disagreed with us, it's great to hear from you regardless, and we appreciate you all.
Yep. Andy said it best, and that's it for us on the Golden Bear Cast. And as always, go Bears.
Go Bears.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.